So, welcome this evening. We got there in the end. We're going to be looking at all the different lizard species in the UK, how to tell them apart, and their ecology. So, if you're wondering what we're looking at here, top left, you've got a juvenile or hatchling sand lizard. To its right, that's a common European wall lizard that we've got established at various points in the UK, including areas of South Wales. To the very right, far right, those are our common or viviparous lizard juveniles. Should be appearing towards the end of the spring, early summer this year. Going back to the left and the middle on the way down, that's a immature female, well, almost mature female Western green lizard, which is native to France and Jersey. But there is a population in southern England that's been there for quite some time now. Bottom left, that's our common viviparous lizard. Again, an adult version of what's on the top right. But this is a melanistic example, pure black. They occur quite regularly, various sites across Wales, including in Neath Talbot. To his right, there's a male adult sand lizard, native in full breeding colours. And to the far right, everyone knows what that is, surely. That's a female slow worm, or a legless lizard species, native to the UK, very, very different ecology to the other species. So we've got 3 native species, as well as 2 colonies well established of European species. And then there's more as well that are not so permanently established. So you've got like a creche of recently deposited juvenile common lizards on the right, and on the bottom left, it's a female sand lizard basking on some dunes. They're probably in a sand dune situation. So you can see the guy who took the picture, Dave Pennington, NMARG is North Merseyside Amphibian and Reptile Group. So he photographed that animal up on the Sefton coast somewhere. So our 3 native species, common or viviparous lizard. Viviparous lizard literally means live bearing. The slow worm, Anguis fragilis, that's a reference to its ability to shed its tail. Also live bearing, viviparous. And then our other native lizard species is different to the others. It's the rarest we have. That's a sand lizard, and that's a female. That's a female of the southern Heathland race. Looks a bit different to the animals we have in Wales. More about that later. But she's very different to the other 2 species in that she lays eggs, whereas both of the other 2, the common and the slow worm, are live bearing. Here's our common lizard, Zootoca vivipara. Incredibly varied. So there's a tan animal on the left, green one in the middle, melanistic on the right. I can tell, being a full-blown lizard nerd, just by looking at this much of the animals, that the animal on the left is a female, the other's a male. How can I tell that? Well, if you look, you can just see a bit of her belly coloration along her flank there. It's plainly unspeckled, okay, and it's like a typical peachy color. Apart from that, they're all very diverse, but I've seen so many female common lizards that color. She's a very typical tan peach color. She's also got a proportionately slightly more smaller, dainty head than the other 2 animals. Okay, there's far more features to go on than that, but straight away you can tell, even without looking at the entirety of the animal, once you get your eye in for them. There's a blue common lizard. He's looking very dark there because he's about to slough. He'll look a lot clearer once he shed his skin. So males can be difficult for people to tell them apart from the females, but on the whole, not always, but on the whole, they're generally more speckled in appearance than the females. They tend to look a bit more stripy. Okay, the real obvious sign is the bulge at the base of the tail where the hemipenis is housed. So I can see it on these animals, but if you look in particular of the animal halfway down in the middle that's facing left, you see at the base of his tail just below his rear legs. You can see there's an obvious bulge at the very base of the tail where the outline of the tail spreads up further either side and then tapers back in to the tail. Okay, that's the hemipenal bulge. It's not present in females for obvious reasons, but also the body proportions are different. So you may have a female common lizard and a male common lizard together. They may measure precisely the same length. However, they'll be different proportionately. The female will have a smaller head. The male will have a chunkier, more massive head, and he will have a shorter torso. The difference between his front legs and his back legs, that length, is shorter than a female. She will have a longer torso because she has to carry the young. Okay. She'll also have a shorter tail proportionately than the male. He'll have a longer tail, shorter torso. He's less sedentary than the female. He needs a longer tail to be agile and maneuver everywhere. Females are more sedentary, smaller territories, and they need a longer body to carry the young. So you notice these, people think they're subtle. They're not once you've been in the field looking at them for a while. Quite discernible differences in their proportions. Okay. Here's that blue common lizard male we saw in the last slide. This is after he's sloughed his skin, so it's significantly paler and brighter looking. Females. So remember what I said, look at that top one. Smaller head proportionately, very long torso. Look at the distance between the front legs and the back legs. She's got a really long body, shorter tail proportionately than the males. And overall, she's got a stripy appearance rather than speckly. Now, this isn't the case always, but it's more often the case. There's another stripy, typical tan-colored female below. Okay, the top one is gravid, full of young. The bottom one looks like she might be, but she isn't actually. What she's doing is spreading out her body surface to make it bigger to soak up more sun. If you looked at her from the side, she'd look very slim. But look at the base of the tails. There's no bulge there, is it? Is there at all? So the base of the tail is the same width right from the beginning and then just very gradually tapers down. There's no obvious bulge at the base of the tail. Here's another heavily gravid female. Okay, you see all the same features there as described. Their bellies are different. Bellies tend to be plain, more often than not, a kind of peach color, sometimes a grayish pale yellow color, but more often not peach. That animal there on the bottom left, she hasn't got any patternization at all. Shows you the diversification again. And you can just make out that peachy color just below her front near side arm there, and you can see that peachy belly color that hasn't got any speckling on it at all. Males have speckling, back speckling all over the bellies. Here's a typical male for you, the bottom left. He's fully grown. Gives you that overall impression of being a speckledy animal, big chunky head. Hasn't got, even though he's a big animal, proportionately his torso is not as long as this smaller animal in the top right of the picture. You can see who has got proportionately a much longer torso, even though the animal is actually smaller. Now that's a female on the top right. She's not fully grown. She's sexually mature, but she will get bigger than that. Okay. He is full grown, the male. Look at the bulge at the base of his tail. In this example, above the rear legs, because you can see where he's positioned, his tail sprouting out and curling off to the left. You can see the waistline there of his tail, the bulge at the base, okay? Not present in the female. Another pair here. So this time the animal on the left that's resting on top of the lower animal. The animal on the left is a female, very stripy, long torso, smaller head proportionately. Then you can see that head compared to the head below her, which is very close by. You can see it's just ever so slightly bigger and chunkier overall, which is more easily recognizable the more time you spend looking at these animals. Another pair again for you, female common lizard on the left. You knew that anyway, didn't you? Look how stripy she is. Look how long her torso is. Look how small her head is compared to the other animals. Got a chunky head. It's much more speckly, shorter torso. Here's a male on the top left, unusually coloured. Well, I've seen hundreds of animals like this, to be honest, but you see more that are speckledy rather than plain like this. And that's the same female that we saw, immature female. Well, no, she's sexually mature, subadult female to his right. She's the same one we saw in the other picture with the speckledy male. This photograph was taken in East Port Talbot, Markham Park, quite a few years ago now, on a fence post. Juvenile animals, to all intents and purposes, people consider them to be black. They're very small, and first impression, they're black. They're actually not, apart from melanistic individuals, of course. They tend to be a very dark tan with a much blacker, darker tail, and various different patterning and colors develop as they grow. So here's a young male developing his coloration. He's probably about 6 weeks old there, and you can see his colors and patterns developing, looking less and less dark as he gets older. This is a male, probably younger than the one we just looked at, showing obvious green coloration already, and you can see it's a male, chunky head, very short distance between the front legs and back legs. Different to this juvenile common lizard, that one's got a very long torso, hasn't got any patterns on it at all, so it's another unpatterned animal, juvenile, and that looks like a female to me with such a long torso. Okay, but she's only about 6 weeks, something like that, 6 weeks of age. Slowworm, very different animal. The scalation is very different. Okay, they're so polished and smooth. That's because they're semi-fossorial. They're burrowing animals. They spend the vast majority of their time in the topsoil layer, the vegetation herb root layer, and that smooth, polished scalation they've got compared to the leg lizards, that makes them a kind of subterranean battering ram for forcing their way through, where they grab hold of things like leather jackets, the larval stage of the daddy longlegs, cranefly, stuff like that, soft-bodied beetles and grubs, worms, small white slugs, slow-moving prey, not like the leg lizards, very slow-moving prey. They don't need legs. Legs would be a hindrance in that subterranean environment. So they're very specialized with that polished, smooth scalation, no legs, specialized diet, different animals that we don't know enough about. Very varied diversification in how they appear. This is a melanistic animal again, a black slowworm. Okay. Quite big animals, if they haven't lost their tail, of course, they can shed their tail like all lizards in the UK and regrow it, but it's never as beautiful as the original. Males, again, different to females in the same way as the common lizard, in that they have much bigger, chunkier heads, more thick-set necks. They're also pretty much a uniform color all over, as you can see in this battle-scarred male here. It's basking between some rocks. Its belly can be different, but overall impression you get looking at this animal, it's the same color all over. There's another male. This is on the gower on the left, adult male, big, thick set head and neck. Impression of the same color all over. To his right, there's an adolescent male. Now, adolescent males are the most commonly confused reptile from my thinking amongst surveyors, in that they're regularly recorded as females when they're not. Okay, they're still displaying some markings from their juvenile stage, which are similar to females. You'll know more about that soon. Show you some more of that shortly. But here's a close-up detail of a East Port Talbot male slowworm, big mature individual, very clearly defined head. It's got eyelids, unlike a snake. Female's much more beautiful, in my opinion. You can see how smooth and polished her scales are, but she looks very coppery, that animal, very metallic looking. But can you see, apart from the fact that she's a richer colour than the male, she's got a daintier head proportionately, and she has clear demarcation of her flanks. You can see the flanks are clearly a darker, different colour to the dorsal surface. That's really obvious, where it isn't the case with the males. Females can have vertical stripes running all the way down the spine, like you can see this one has a faint version of. Sometimes they'll have dorsolateral stripes either side of it. Sometimes they don't, but they will always have that clear demarcation of the much darker sides of the body compared to the dorsal surface. And they come in such a diverse range of colors. Here's a female. This is a bridge end individual I photographed. You can see the obvious dark flanks, but she hasn't got the dorsal stripe or dorsolateral stripes that the other animals have got. Okay, but you can still see there's obviously a female with those dark flanks. Okay, juveniles are beautiful little creatures. They're like little living jewels. They're so brightly colored, sometimes very metallic looking, tiny, and they're kind of like extreme versions of the coloring of a female. They have that obvious, normally, nearly always, but not always, normally they have that obvious black vertical stripe and clear demarcation of the flanks and belly, which is jet black at this stage. Beautiful looking creatures. Here's a female with her recently deposited young and an older one there as well in the picture. So again, you can see her dark flanks, vertical stripe, same thing going on with these youngsters, but more obvious with them. So those markings of the juveniles, they fade away as the animal matures. Okay, and that's where it becomes confusing for people to tell the sex of adolescent males, and obviously very often mislabeled as females. Now, bottom left, that's a very, very recently dropped slow-worm, neonate slow-worm, just been born very recently. I photographed that one in Bridgend a few years back, but you can see that clear demarcation of the sides and the vertical stripe. Those markings fade away almost completely in the case of males, but not so in the case of females. So when a young male is in adolescent stage, they are regularly confused with females. Doesn't happen to me so much now, and the first time I discovered that was when we had to physically handle some slow worms, and somebody said it was a female, and it became obvious that it wasn't when it decided to defecate on my hand, and I could see, everybody could plainly see its hemipenis extended, so it was a male, not a female. The sand lizard is very different. It's our rarest native lizard in the UK. Extinct in Wales, probably in the 50s or 60s, reintroduced as part of an official reintroduction program in partnership with various organizations, including ARC, from the early 2000s onwards to various suitable sites, mostly in the north of Wales and coastal dune systems, but also some in mid Wales. There's also been some guerrilla rewilding, and there are some populations on the Isle of Anglesey and on the Gower as well, which we are uncertain how they got there, but they've had the DNA testing, and we know that they're UK animals at least. Here we are looking at some sand lizard males that have emerged from hibernation. On the top right, that's a northern dune dwelling race sand lizard, as we have in Wales. And on the left, that darker animal, he's from Surrey. He lives on southern inland sandy heathland. Very different habitat, but with the same broad resources as a dune. You can see he's much darker, but neither of them are by any stretch of the imagination green, are they? That's because they've just emerged from hibernation and they're looking pretty dull. They need to bask in the sun to develop their colors, and they need to shed their skin. So you can see running along the length of their spine, those animals, and here as well, This animal's later on in the years developed as green coloration, also a southern heathland race animal. Okay, but you can see running along from the back of their head, right along the length of their spine to their tail, including the tail, there's a dark brown strip, a tan or brown strip, flanked either side by dorsolateral stripes, and all the way along that back stripe is what we call a back patterns, and that is individual to each individual lizard. That's unique to each individual lizard. It's like a fingerprint. There's no two animals the same. That's really useful for monitoring them, establishing the behavior, the range, etc. Yeah, back patterns to identify them. Very, very useful when you're surveying them. So very different in coloration when they start to get full of testosterone. They've been basking in the sun for a while. They've developed viable sperm. They're firing blanks when they emerge from hibernation, very dull looking, so they have to bask and soak up a lot of UV to develop viable sperm. Females emerge a lot later. Otherwise, just they're wasting their time. They'd be hassled pointlessly. Anyway, you can see a dune race sand lizard male on the left. I photographed him in Surrey. On the right, there's a northern dune race male sand lizard. Sorry, heathland race on the left. Southern heathland race on the left, northern dune race on the right. Okay, and the northern dune race is the donor population of what has been used to repopulate different suitable coastal dunes in Wales. Okay, they are the northern dune race. There's another northern dune race animal below, that's photographed at Madfallod in Gwynedd. Can you see the dark scarring on his head? That's where he's been battling with another male. Okay. Here is a southern heathland race male. Heavier patterns, darker patterns, more grass green, and he's basking on a pillow of moss and heathland rather than sand. Here's another southern heath race male, this time in Dorset. And here's a northern dune race animal, this time on the Sefton coast above Liverpool. But again, this is the population of animals that has been the source of stock for the reintroduction to Wales. Here's a comparison for you of various different projects we've been involved with to show examples of a comparison of northern dune race males at the top with southern heathland race animals below. All those back patterns are completely unique, but you can see the general difference of the races, same species, but different race due to living in different habitats. Females, amongst herpetologists, females sand lizards are renowned as being the most challenging reptiles to spot. They really don't want to be found. They're incredibly cryptic. These are all southern heathland females we're looking at. You try and find them in the dappled light as well. They're masters of cryptic disguise. Coastal dune race female sand lizards are allegedly even more challenging to find. Some people just think they're a myth. Here's a pair. The one on the bottom left is one of those beautiful yellow-bellied females. I photographed her under license at Ynyslas above Aberystwyth. To the right of her, it's another female sand lizard, also from Ynyslas above Aberystwyth, but she's very different. Can you see? She hasn't got the yellow underside, very pale grey underside, very pale animal altogether. There's a heathland race female for comparison. You can see much more heavily patterned. Same species, different race. Okay. You try and spot them. Here's a dune race female sand lizard out, fully exposed for everybody to see basking, but you try and spot them. They are masters of disguise. You can see she's aligned her dorsolateral stripes, so they're perfectly aligned with the marum. Not easy animals to spot, to survey. Let's look at some juveniles. So this is a heathland race juvenile, very dark, lots of obvious ocelli spotting. This is a dune race animal that I photographed myself. Very different looking, in my opinion, paler. Same dorsolateral stripes running the length of the body and the patternization between them, of course, but lighter animal. This is a juvenile, the one on the bottom left. I photographed that in early April a few years ago. So that animal has spent the winter hibernating at that size. They're quite amazing little creatures, very tough. Here are some examples of southern heathland raced juveniles, generally darker and more ocelli, the eye pattern. Here's some dune race animals like we have in Wales, slightly different. Generally, the dorsolateral stripes seem to be broader than is the case with the southern heathland animals you can see above, and generally lighter on the dunes and darker animals on the heathlands. We also have some introduced lizard species, which is not a recommended thing to do. You can bring all kinds of issues such as introduced pathogens, diseases, unwanted competition, etc. However, wall lizards are well established at numerous locations in the UK, including southern Wales. The other species that's established is not present in Wales, not established in Wales. We get occasional sightings of escapees, etc. People keep them as pets, but the western green lizard, Lacerta bilineata, which refers to the two lines on the females and the juveniles, they're as well established at a place down in Dorset. So the wall lizard, that's the non-native lizard species you're most likely to encounter. There's an established colony on the Gower. It's been there since the 50s, and there are occasional sightings elsewhere. There's been sightings in the Vale of Glamorgan recently, but we haven't confirmed whether they're breeding. I also managed to capture an animal from Ceredigion 2 years ago, just an individual that had been released by the looks of it. Yeah. There's a green back form from Italy, a brown back form from France, and in some places in southern England, you've got both kinds now. They've got this very attractive herringbone pattern, as you can see. Males, it's different with Podarcus, this genus of lizards, compared to ours, in that the males get bigger than the females, okay? Very different genus of lizards. Very fecund, very agile, very long digits for climbing walls, very acrobatic. Females, you can get green females as well. That's one I photographed on the top, and she would have got greener than that. That was very early March. She'd just emerged from hibernation. Quite often those flanks, those coloured flanks, are more obvious, darker than in the case of the males. Here's a classic looking female on the left, obvious dark flanks. And look at the base of her tail. There's no bulge. That's clearly the same width uniformly until it starts to taper further down. Whereas if you look to the right, that picture of the male courting the female, you can plainly see that hemipenal bulge at the base of his tail. Okay. Juvenile wall lizards, you can even see them basking in December if the temperature's 10 degrees, which I've done so at numerous sites where they occur. There's an immature or juvenile on the right that I photographed on the Gower. That's been through a hibernation. On the left there, that's a newly hatched wall lizard. Wall lizards are egg laying, okay? They lay their eggs in rock crevices. But look how disproportionately large its head is. That's just literally hatched a day or two ago, okay? More examples of juvenile developing wall lizards there. Basically, if you see a lizard, common lizards can climb walls and dry stone walls, but if you see a lizard run up a wall effortlessly, it's a wall lizard. This is the western green lizard. We haven't got them, to our knowledge, established in Wales. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but we've got them down in the south of England. Big animals, very slim, quite beautiful. Here's a male, a dark mottled male, basking on some gorse down in Dorset. They also develop this blue coloration, the males, on their throat, which makes them particularly attractive. There's another example there. You're not going to confuse them with a native lizard species. Here's some females. Look at the two lines, dorsolateral lines, hence their name, bilineata. Adult females, as they mature, those stripes tend to fade away. So that's a very mature female on the right there. As a developing young female, a typical coloration, quite beautiful. Juveniles have got that distinctive green throat, but they can vary from being pretty plain looking, brownish grey, to the two stripes, as you can see. Obviously, much bigger than our juvenile lizards. They look like almost common lizard, adult common lizard size, not far off. There is a third species, the Rhywogaeth lizard, that is also referred to as the Italian wall lizard, which can be confusing because you also get common wall lizards from Italy. We get occasional reports of individuals here, there, and everywhere, but there's just one colony that seems to be established on the border of England and Wales. That's all you need to know about those guys at the moment. So through the seasons, lizards' life is a life of rhythms, hibernation, emergence. Here we've got a common lizard that I literally photographed. He emerging from hibernation. He's just woken up. You can see he's come out of the hole in the dunes, sand in his eye, very dull. His back legs aren't even functioning properly yet. He needs to bask in the sun to get fully charged up. There he is, sprawled out at the entrance to his burrow on a not particularly sunny morning, soaking up some UV, waiting for the sun to get warmer. It's all about thermoregulation. Okay, developing viable sperm whilst they're doing so, feeding, mating, reproduction, which is something that the males don't have to worry about. Off they go again, feeding, while the females are busily nurturing, developing broods. Lots of feeding for the males. Females can feed up to a certain stage, but then when they have developing young or eggs in them, it gets to a point where there's not enough room to feed. So quite a drain on the female's resources. Then it's back to hibernation after a lot of feeding. Generally, males will go into hibernation before females. There's a male sand lizard on the heathland who's emerged from hibernation, very dull looking at this stage. There's two reptiles in this picture. There's the slow worm. You can just make out that's also emerged from hibernation. Cryptic basking, just showing a section of its body at a time. So reptiles are ectothermic. That means they're entirely reliant on an external heat source. So they really need a variable vegetation structure. So vegetation not 1 meter high, ideally, interspersed with basking spots with a south-facing aspect, undulating topography to provide all these different variations for potential heat traps and thermoregulation, rather than just open, bare, featureless habitat of the same sward height, which is hostile to ectothermic creatures like reptiles and invertebrates. Insolation, that's exposure to the sun. So this lizard, common lizard, is doing that. In Ceredigion on some slate, he's basking and insulating by soaking up the previously warmed slate from his belly upwards and the sun beating down from above too. Here's the same site. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lizards all basking in the picture there. Lots of opportunities for them there. Lots of opportunities to hide, to bask, to forage. It's lizard heaven. Here's another male sand lizard doing the same thing, basking, insulation. He looks fat. He isn't. He's just spread out his body as a solar panel to soak up as much sun as he could. If you look at him from the side, he'll look quite thin. There's some juvenile common lizards basking on a boardwalk. Same thing going, soaking up heat from below and above. You can spot some lizard droppings there. They're useful to recognize for on days when it's not sunny. If you see droppings like that, you might come back on a sunny day. What's we got here? It's less obvious sometimes. There's a common lizard, cryptic basking. He's looking straight at the camera. Can even see it's a male. You'll get your eye in for this too, the more you get out. There's a slow worm, mosaic basking, just demonstrating how they don't often bask fully out in the sun, but rather just show sections of themselves at a time. So that can easily be confused as a bracken frond or a stem. There's a lizard here, cryptic basking in full view. It's looking right at the camera. Its eyes in the picture, believe it or not, top right. There it is. You can just make it out. Mosaic, cryptic basking in the vegetation, but in full sunshine. Slow worms, a whole load of them here. They prefer generally to thermoregulate beneath warm objects or in organic material that's producing heat rather than out and out basking, but they do bask. Here's another slow worm doing just that. Structural diversity. That's what reptiles need, particularly lizards. So here we've got tussocky malinia. Here we've got vegetated coastal cliff paths. It's not important what the floristic, the species of the flora is. It's the actual physical structure that's important. Okay, so here we have a similar thing going on for reptiles, but on a sand dune, similar to the heathland, but a sand dune. This is a common lizard living on bracken, as you can see in Ceredigion. You can see his coloration blends in there. So does this one. This animal's on the dunes, very different, stripy to fit in with dune habitat. This is a female. Here's a yellow banana looking like male common lizard on the dunes. I've never seen such diversification of colors and patterns in common lizards as in dune habitats. Look at this one, turquoise on the dune. Why is it turquoise? No idea. Another pair of lizards showing their diversification in color. Common lizards there for you. So heathland is often perceived as a really good habitat for lizards and reptiles, and it is, but they need the structural diversity clearly shown here with a range of different vegetation heights and structures, bare areas, bits of rock, topographical variations, lots of structural diversity at ground level, providing lots of opportunities. But here's some heathland following a fire. It's a head of monoculture, a sward height, very uniform height all the way across, useless for reptiles, useless for thermoregulation. So when it's recovering from fire like this, it's useless for a long time. And you get to stages where you need to cut bits of it again so that you get a staggered, structured vegetation structure. It takes a long time to heal back from fire. Edges of habitats are disproportionately important for reptiles. Okay, remember that. Always look at edges. Here's some examples, some more subtle than others. There you go, alongside a path. Subtle bramble and gorse interface, ideal for reptiles, sheltered from the wind, full sun. They can bask right in the sun and just be a short dash into cover. And it's also these edges or interfaces where you get the greatest diversity of invertebrates. Same thing going on here, different plant species. People walk past edges with reptiles basking all the time. Look at all these people on the way to the beach. You see the diagonal support to the post there. That's what's sitting on it, a male sand lizard. So used to people walking by, people never see them. Feeding, invertebrates predominantly. Here's a male sand lizard quaffing down a damselfly. Sand lizards are the easiest for me to photograph and for my colleagues and friends feeding. They're much easier to photograph than common lizards once you know where they are. Here's various animals quaffing down spiders, caterpillars, harvestmen. The female I photographed actively hunting through the moss there down in Surrey. A male on the Sefton coast dealing with a female on the Sefton coast dealing with a snail. A male in Surrey eating a grasshopper. A common lizard quaffing down a big spider on the dunes on the Gower. Mating. Here we can see a slow worm, a male with a female grabbing hold of her by the neck. That's the only hold he can secure. Romance is still alive in the lizard world, as you can see. This is a male common lizard. He grasps the female here, then maneuvers himself forward further. As you can see here, a very green male common lizard mating with a tan-coloured female common lizard. So egg layers, the sand lizard and the introduced lizards. Life bearers, common of viviparous lizard. and a slow worm. So if you're an egg layer, you need egg-laying sites. So bare sand in the case of sand lizards and rock crevices in the case of the wall lizards. Live bearers, they need to thermoregulate and develop their brood. These animals can occur further north than any other reptiles because they don't have to rely on incubating eggs externally. They do use warm places such as compost heaps, particularly slow worms. Here's some recently deposited common lizards, probably a week or so old. Look how bulbous their heads look. These are even younger, probably just literally 2 or 3 days. Very bulbous looking heads. Newly deposited slow worms, hard to mistake for anything else. Here we have a young common lizard photographed in September. So it's probably about 3 months old. Okay, late September, and it's flanked by a pair of juvenile hatchling sand lizards either side of it. So you can see they're different. The sand lizards are much younger than the common lizard, but they're already almost the same size. Comparison for you, again, on the right, sand lizard juvenile, on the left, common lizard juvenile. Generally, common lizard juveniles darker than the sand lizards. Lots of predators. I've given you the depressing list previously. It's just they need to actually find the lizards in the first place and catch them. Kestrels are expert at it. Pheasants are very detrimental to reptile populations, and I won't talk about too much detail about them because it makes my blood boil. Here's a demonstration of how a tiny juvenile adder that was moved in translocation can eat unbelievably sized adult female common lizard. You can see by a plain unspeckled belly there. That lizard was regurgitated by that young snake, obviously because it was distressed to be moved during the translocation. But this is a demonstration of what they can eat. Unbelievable, isn't it? Sloughing cycles. Lizards need to slough not long after they've emerged from hibernation. Everything happens then, pheromones, it all starts to happen. They also slough when they need to shift external parasites, and they'll slough before entering hibernation. Now, generally it's piecemeal, but now and again you find quite large sloughs. These are sand lizard sloughs, and the nerd here among us can even tell you that that is a heathland slough, because you can see how much heavily patterned it is compared to the one I found below, which was a dune race sand lizard slough. Look, it's a lot lighter patterned and more stripy, isn't it? Sand lizards, different to the other species in that they're egg laying. They've got pretty specific habitat requirements. They've got to have some bare sand available, and they need temperatures to get higher than those the live bearing species. Okay, specialist habitat requirements. Here's a female photographed towards the end of the day in the spring. She's climbing up high on heather to reach the end of the sun, the last rays of the sun. That's in Heathland and Surrey. Here you've got a northern race male photographed on the Sefydledig coast. Very different coloration to the dunes, to the Heathland animals. So lizards and reptiles of all kinds are never evenly distributed across the site. You get them patchily distributed where we have what we call a focus occurring. And a focus is where the habitat is particularly suitable for the reptiles. Now here you can see on Surrey Heathland, a site where I saw my first sand lizards when I was 9 years old. Visited again recently. Here you can see vegetation no more than a metre in height, interspersed with patches of bare sand on a slope in full sun, everything that they need. Okay, don't take any notice of the species of vegetation, it's the vegetation structure. So this is on southern Heathland. Same thing going on here on a coastal dune system in Wales, completely different plant species, but it's the same height, it's the same aspect there, it's interspersed with sand, okay, full of invertebrates. Same thing going on as down on the Heathland, but in a different way, a different habitat. So there you can see in the frontals in this glass, a close-up, little sand patches, bare sand patches surrounded by marram grass. Those are the ideal basking egg-laying sites that sand use in Wales, and it tends to be the frontal dunes where the highest population densities occur. Males emerge from hibernation first. You can see a male here on the left I photographed. He's not green yet. How can I tell he's a male? He's much broader head than the female that emerged later to the right. She's got a much narrower head by comparison. Here's a southern heathland male emerging, much darker. Okay. And this is just to show you, this is a male I photographed early April, late March, a couple of years ago on the Gower on the dune. And this animal hasn't coloured up yet. He's recently emerged from hibernation, but he's determined to get as much heat and UV as he can. This was on a day when I couldn't stand up. The wind was blowing so hard. The sand was stinging my face. I couldn't stand up to take a picture. I had to reverse, lie down and sneak forward towards him. And that's why he's eyeing me up there. I was lying on the floor photographing him. He'd found this little divot, microclimate, beneath a little divot of marram grass, whilst the wind was blowing a howling gale, and he was there able to effectively thermoregulate on a day when you would never think reptiles would be out and about. Mate guarding is when males bask near the females. Adders do the same thing as well. It doesn't work, okay? It's trying to keep the female all to himself. It doesn't work. Here's another pair doing them. I photographed this in Anglesey. Beautiful, typical June-coloured male there. Some more doing the same thing on this glass. Mate guarding doesn't work at all. This animal isn't even greened up yet. This was last spring when we had a ridiculously early warm spring, and I was observing mating as early as 4th of April, which is unheard of. He hasn't even reached full green coloration yet. But like I said, mate guarding doesn't work. Posturing, two males will spot each other, visibly intensify their green coloration, raise their backs, puff themselves up, hiss air at each other, do parallel walking like stags in circles. Eventually, 9 times out of 10, one of them just runs off on his own accord and is half-heartedly chased off by the other, and that's it. Now and again, evenly matched lizards will have a full-on serious fight. It's too difficult to get on camera. It's too quick. That's why I drew this picture for you. Don't mock my efforts, please. Here's a male with blue coloration all over his head. He's recently had a serious punch up with another male. Okay. So yeah, mate guarding doesn't work. I photographed this male mate guarding this female in Surrey. He got tempted by a grasshopper. She wandered off. Another male instantly started tail biting, mating. Short version of events is we saw her mate with 3 different males within a 20-minute period, none of which were that dominant male that was mate guarding her. More mating on the dunes for you. So to start off with, it's tail biting. Like I said, romance is alive in the lizard world. Then it moves up to the mating, but tail biting preliminates it. Egg laying, females need to find a suitable site to lay their eggs. It's always at the end of the afternoon, never in the morning. The animal at the bottom there, I photographed her laying her eggs on a site in Devon a few years ago. You can see the long shadows in the picture. It was about 6:30 on a late May evening. There's some captive bred reptiles for the reintroduction program, captive bred sand lizards, showing the size of the eggs in relation to 20 pence a piece, 5 pence a piece, very small. Conservation research, we're constantly striving to understand the species better. So little is known about them. I've been involved in quite a bit of research. There's a female on the bottom left having a health check and a heart monitored. You can see the back patterns of these animals that they caught for examination and DNA extraction. Male, female, male, female, female, male, female, male. You can see that all their back patterns are incredibly different. So easy to tell individuals apart. Lots of conservation issues, fire, habitat disturbance. I won't go on. This lizard on the right was trapped inside a lager can and was luckily found by a surveyor and released. Not all lizards are that lucky. Unfortunately, here's a bottle with a dead common lizard in it, which I found. I tipped him out. The only good thing about this picture is that you can see how orange bright orange the male's common lizard's tummy is compared to the pale peach of the female. But this is really sad. It's not always that bad for them. Here's a wine bottle. I got on the dunes very early in the morning. The sun was coming up. I saw this wine bottle. People are just such pigs with their rubbish. And you can see the lizards inside the wine bottle. Luckily, they hadn't cooked yet. I tipped them out. 10 minutes later, it's a blurry picture. Each one of them had wandered off. So they were very lucky. I saw that bottle before the sun really cooked them. One more picture for you to show you what can happen with lizards when they're not expecting it. This poor lizard was kept as a captive and brought to me to recuperate. It was kept unsuitably as a captive. It's positively anorexic. It's got sunken eyes, very dark, looks really tatty. Look how skinny its legs are, how tatty its scalation is. This is what it looked like after 5 weeks in my care. He's completely fleshed out, rehydrated, shed his skin, completely different animal. He was successfully released because he wasn't brought in contact with any alien species, so it wouldn't have picked up any diseases, and it's safe for me to release him. But yeah, please don't put them in captivity like this person did. Thanks for listening. Sorry I went over a little bit. There was a lot of information there. Fire away with your questions.
Thanks, Pete. Very interesting as always. Are there any questions, guys? Feel free to pop them in the chat or raise your hand. Christine?
Hiya. There was a lizard. Was he eating a wasp? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
When
Was a lizard
they
eating a
were
wasp? I've seen
was a wall lizard. Was he eating a wasp?
Yeah, wall lizards will eat pretty much anything from
God.
strawberry jam to baby mice and other lizards. Wall lizards
Baby
are
mice?
very different animals to our lizards. Seriously.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a couple of people typing. In the meantime, I have a question. The common lizards colour variation. Is there like any advantage to them being different colours? Like what's the purpose of a blue one? You know, surely they're at a bit of a disadvantage because they're going to be a bit more visible.
I have absolutely no idea. In some cases, it looks very, very obvious that they're matched in with their habitat. In other cases, like seeing a jet black sand lizard basking on sand in the dune system, you know, what on earth is that about? Black animals will soak up heat quicker, so they might not need to bask for as long, etc. But nobody knows the answer to your question. Incredibly diverse. The common lizard is.
Very beautiful. Peter and Claire are asking, when building new dry stone walls, should we intentionally create voids within the wall for hibernation or breeding?
Yes and no. If you leave them too big, you'll end up having rats living in them. Whereas lizards are pretty accomplished at squeezing into really tight spaces, especially if something like a bank vole or something has already done a little bit of burrowing it. So I wouldn't worry too much about providing open spaces in there. Just make sure it's not jam-packed, if I'm making any sense. You'd be surprised at how tight a space reptiles will squeeze into, and they prefer to squeeze into really tight spaces because rats can't get to them.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just wondering, it mentioned about sand lizards had become extinct in Wales at one point. So I take it it's not known why, and I assume it's not known when that happened. Was it just known that they lived here in the past at some point? And
probably at some point during the 50s and 60s, sand lizards have always been confused with common lizards. Even Linnaeus confused them, and he had specimens to examine rather than just seeing one run across the path in front of him. They're constantly being confused. They need very different habitats. Unfortunately, the Welsh habitat was confined to coastal dune systems. If you look at the history of coastal dune systems, combined with being bombed, driven over by four-wheel drivers and beach buggies during the 50s and 60s, plagued with caravans at various different sites, the list goes on and on, planted with conifers, etc., all kinds of, it's unsurprising that they became extinct. So there's a whole list of potential contributing factors there as to why they did. We can't say exactly when they became extinct, probably 50s and 60s, due to lots of misidentifications and false records. Hope that answers your question.
Oh,
as
yeah,
well as possibly could.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Jane has asked a question. She's asked, what's the best position for reptile refuge for reptile refugia, corrugated iron, and if it helps in wood pasture. Oh, sorry, I think it's going to be positioned in wood pasture / wildflower meadow in a location in Kent.
We are going to be giving a presentation all about reptile survey techniques, during which I will elaborate about that. It's a very long, complicated discussion. Really haven't got time to do that now, but obviously don't put them in the shade, put them in the sun.
There we are. And Natalie has asked, is morning or afternoon best for surveying?
Could you say that again? Sorry.
Is morning or afternoon best for surveying?
Again, this is what we will cover in detail in the reptile surveying section. It depends what time of year, what the weather's like, what the previous weather conditions were, etc., etc. I cannot give a stock standard answer. On the whole, morning's probably a better bet.
Okay. Jane has asked another question. How many sand lizards are there left in the UK now? Do we know?
It's just an estimation. Absolutely no idea. More than there were because of reintroductions.
Cool. The reptile survey session is going to be the week after next, I believe, because we're doing snakes in the next session, I think, aren't we, Pete?
That's right.
Yeah. Fab. I had one more question, actually. The picture that you showed of the sand lizard and the common lizard next to each other together in the same area.
The juveniles.
Yeah. Do they coexist quite happily, or do they does one outcompete the other, or?
No. So common lizards can live virtually anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Sand lizards are restricted to where they can successfully incubate their eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So in situations where the habitat favors sand lizards will dominate because they're bigger. And I've never seen a female sand lizard move so fast as when she quaffed down a freshly deposited juvenile common lizard. They don't go around doing it all the time, but if you think about it, she's laid at that time of year, she's deposited a clutch of eggs, she's drained of protein and calcium, and there is a little parcel of both things right in front of her. So of course they're going to wolf them down. So, but they do not outcompete each other.
Right.
You see them basking together, etc. But where the habitat favors sand lizards, they will dominate, which is not a problem because common lizards are still there and they always proliferate and they can breed in other habitats that sand lizards can't breed in.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then probably got time for one more question. Vicky has asked, do they hybridize common and sand lizards?
It's impossible. Not even in the same genus. A live-bearing Zootoca and an egg-laying Lacertid, it's just not going to happen.
Lovely. I think that's all the questions then. So yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you for coming, everyone. And yeah, if you want to find out more about reptile surveys, come to the week after next, but come to next week as well, because we're going to be talking about snakes, which would be fab. Yeah, so thanks again, Pete. And thanks everyone for coming, and have a lovely evening. I'll see you all soon.